Hi, everybody. This is Ward Sanders with on City Council, with this, we're here as the Lambertville Cannabis Work Group. This is being recorded as a webinar, so if you and your friends want to see this again, you're certainly welcome to rewatch it. But we're going to take an hour of time, or about an hour of time, to spend with a little background information on Lambertville's, on the state law regarding cannabis. We have a slide deck that we will show, and it's also available on the city's website. We'll talk a little bit about the cannabis ordinance that was proposed recently by City Council, and then we're going to turn from the sort of the background piece to hearing from you, because we want to hear from Lambertville businesses. We had about a dozen or so folks sign up, and we appreciate you taking the time out to listen to us and to share your thoughts with us. So why don't we start off? I think
Ward, excuse me just for a second. There are 5 folks on. Why don't we wait a couple of more minutes?
Sure. Yeah, why don't we wait 2 minutes?
People are coming on slowly. And hi, everybody.
So you'll see on the screen here, you have Councilman Stegman, who's been helping us out with this project, and Stephanie Moss, who is on the planning board. This is not an open public meeting. We don't have a quorum of either the governing body or the planning board. This is really just an educational and endeavor, and to also get your input. So we'll wait a minute or two. And while we're doing that, Stephanie, do you want to put up the slide deck just to start us off here, and then we'll.
Sure.
Yeah. If you're just joining us, we've set this up as a webinar. We'll start in a minute or two with going through a slide deck. Hey, Cindy, could you do me a favor? I think Reggie had a problem with the link or couldn't find the link and just texted me. Did you send him the link?
Yeah, let me see what I can do.
Yeah, thank you.
Ward, can you see that?
I cannot.
Shoot. Okay, hang on.
Bear with us, folks. I know folks are dialing in here. We had about, Steve, we have 12 or 14 folks sign up.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, so we want to make sure that.
So far, we have 7.
Stephanie, I made you a co-host, so that should help.
Oh, thank you. Now?
Not yet. There we go.
Oh.
Terrific.
Better?
Yep.
Okay.
We have participants. Again, if you're just joining us here, we're going to start up in 1 second. We'll go through a slide deck, and then we'd like to hear from folks in the business community.
We're up to we have how many now? 6.
Appreciate folks joining on.
Yep. Well, it's 5:34. Why don't we wait till 35 and then we'll start 1 more minute.
Okay, thanks, Steve.
Yep.
As we're waiting here, I do want to do a quick shout out to Stephanie for putting this slide deck together. Really did a nice job on this.
Thank you.
Much fancier than I could have done, that's for sure.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, I do.
Just to keep your attention going.
And Cindy, why don't you send it to Corin as well, if you could, if you happen to have her address. She said she was going to be able to join us, but I don't see her on here.
Well, it's
Will do.
5:35.
Okay,
Let's
terrific.
continue.
Okay, so thanks everybody again, and why don't we move to the first the second slide, Stephanie. So again, this is a public forum. We've gone through the introduction of the work group members. There are two others, Reggie Ross and Corin Woznicki. Hopefully will join us soon. We're going to do a little background and overview of the state law, provide a couple guidelines for public comment. We have a small group here, so I don't think we need to spend too much time on that. And then we'll hear public comment from folks. This is the, I should note, this is the third forum that we've done. We did one in person for residents and businesses here in town. We also did a Zoom one. Both were in June. So this is the third one we're doing. This one is targeted to the business community, and appreciate you guys joining. So the goals here of the work group, I want to make sure that that's clear. One, it was to develop educational materials, which are now on the city's website and includes this deck, to solicit input from Lambertville residents, businesses, and interested parties, and those with expertise in cannabis-related businesses, to collect data through a survey of residents and local businesses, which will hopefully go out this week. And lastly, to provide data, findings, and observations to the Lambertville City Council as soon as possible. The council, as we'll talk about, has to make a final decision before an August 21st deadline. So we've got a little over, I don't know, 5 or 6 weeks here. Okay, Stephanie, can we move to the next slide? Again, just by way of background here, this is a picture of the United States showing the states that have legalized recreational use and states that have legalized medical use. This is from the New Jersey State League, the National Conference of State Legislators, which is a sort of a trusted source of information from state legislative bodies. So you can see that there's 17 states have, including New Jersey, have legalized recreational use. A much larger number, and an earlier group had legalized medical use. So you can move to the next slide. So what does New Jersey's law on legalization allow? So it does allow possession of up to 6 ounces of cannabis and 170 grams of hashish, and there's no criminal or civil penalties that would be associated with possession of amounts below those. The Cannabis Regulatory Commission, which is a state agency housed within the Department of Health, has the power to regulate the purchase, sale, cultivation, manufacturing, packaging, transportation, and delivery of cannabis items. It also has the power to grant, refuse, suspend, revoke, and limit licenses or conditional licenses. This is an important point because the city is not going to be licensing entities. It will be the state that licenses entities. So it could be that there's no licenses that are granted to Lambertville entities. It does not allow growing of your own cannabis, although that has been a point of contention. I know there's bills in the legislature to remove that provision, but the bill that was passed would prohibit growing your own cannabis with some substantial penalties involved. For those who are of the age of majority here, age 18, who are between 18 and 20, there are penalties for possession if you're below 21. And also of note is that the state law provided for a social equity provisions. So there are fees that are addressed at the state level. And there are various provisions to try to address sort of the history of the prohibition on cannabis and how it affected different communities. It also allows for a sort of a set aside of certain minority-owned businesses. So if we can move to the next slide here. We keep talking about the cannabis businesses. There are really 6 classes that are outlined in the law. You think about it as they sort of go from seed here to sale in terms of progression. So class 1 is cultivator, so that's growing, cannabis. Processor is class 2, that's to manufacture, prepare, and package it. Class 3 is wholesaler, and this is like a normal wholesaler. Class 4 is a distributor. Class 5 is retailer, which is what we have focused on in our initial reviews here in Lambertville, and Class 6, a delivery. There are also provisions in the law for consumption areas and testing facilities, and a certain definition for micro businesses, which we'll talk a little bit about. So those are the 6 types of classes of cannabis. The next slide. So what do we have to do here? So we have the option to authorize and regulate the number of cannabis businesses in our city. But only the Cannabis Regulatory Commission can regulate delivery services. Remember, that was Class 6. So we could prohibit the location of all businesses here in Lambertville. We could not prohibit another municipality's delivery service delivering in Lambertville. So irrespective of whether we act or don't act, you would see delivery services possible in Lambertville. The city has, and all municipalities have, 180 days after the enactment, which takes us to August 21st, to act on whether to prohibit cannabis or not. If you do not act within 180 days, then any class of cannabis establishment is permitted to operate in the municipality. And I don't think any municipalities headed down that path. They either want to ban it to get more time, or to permit certain uses. Again, if you don't act to ban it, you're locked in for a period of 5 years of allowing all cannabis types of businesses. And the last point that we wanted to note here in this slide is that municipalities can adopt a tax that's not to exceed 2% for most of the classes, except for 1% for a wholesaler. It is the taxing authority of municipalities is limited. It is really focused on property taxes. There are very few other avenues of permissible revenue generation for cities. You know, you can have parking meters, there's a hotel tax, but there's not really many other ways that cities can raise funds outside of the local property tax. Move to the next slide. So what we try to outline the things that people generally talk about as having a positive impact, and then we'll turn to negative impact. So first is the tax revenue. Again, that could be fairly substantial for a city of our size, and we could use that revenue as we saw fit. Storefronts being used. So if it's been a tough time during the pandemic, we have had stores closed, and it sometimes takes a while for businesses to sort of follow in. So this is another type of business that can make sure that our business community is not dark. There's parking meter revenue. As I said, it is one area where we can raise funds, and increased traffic related to cannabis businesses could bring in parking meter revenue increases. And then tourist business, increase in sales for other businesses and food and beverage providers. And I'm sure there's others. So next slide, we'll look at the potentially the negative impacts. We sometimes have traffic issues in town. Traffic can both be good and bad. But too much traffic can choke the arteries of the city and make it more complicated to move through town. We do have challenges in parking already, especially in some residential areas. But there is a potential for sort of exacerbating that problem. The third thing is that because of the federal designation of cannabis as a controlled substance, there are limitations about banking across and business across state lines. So it does sort of hamstring entities and municipalities in how cash is handled by the business. And there would be increased workload for the city staff, as this tax would both be a good thing coming in, but it would also increase the money coming in. Increased traffic and parking issues could increase the need for police work too. Move to the next slide. So where are possible areas that it could be housed? So we're a little bit past this slide in some respect because we have proposed an ordinance that will be up for comment. And we have focused on the Central Business District, C2 and C3. And Stephanie is using the pointer to show those areas very nicely. The names here, by the way, are just not because those are potential sites, but just to orient the reader as to what location we're talking about. So the Central Business District is the pink area. It also includes across the canal there at the sort of Old River Horse Brewery. C2 commercial is the area in red, and C3 is the area in maroon. Okay. Next slide. There's been some question under federal law. There's a drug-free school zone of 1,000 feet. There is some question that has been raised as to whether those kinds of restrictions would apply to state-sanctioned and licensed cannabis facilities. We have put in our proposal 500 feet, which is the smaller circles. You'll see a circle around the school. There's a question as to whether it would apply to preschools and things like that. So just to give you a sense of, we don't know what the Cannabis Regulatory Commission is going to say about this. If it were 1,000 feet, it would knock out some pretty big, significant areas of permissible locations in Lambertville. It would really, there'd be a very small portion, I guess, of the Central Business District and down by the Laceworks. Again, it's to be determined at the state level how they view this. We put in our ordinance that was proposed a 500-foot, which does provide an area of protection around, certainly around LPS and so forth. So go to the next slide. What do these stores look like? This is not your sort of father's head shop look that folks have traditionally seen here. This is a location that is, and these often have a sort of a common look. This is kind of looks like an Apple store. We've noted a couple of times, but there are certain requirements under the state law as to what those facilities look like, what the we have some signage requirements under our local ordinance, sort of a vestibule to come in, security features, and so forth. So there's a lot of regulation at the state level in the statute. There probably will be some more by regulation by the state regulatory body, and we have put some regulations in our ordinance, which has been introduced. Of note, so the law requires 24/7 security cameras, and you have to have security inside the premises when you're open. And there has to be a vestibule to sort of check in. You can't, it's just not like a walk-in business. Okay, get to the next slide. This is a read with caution. We thought this was interesting. Here are two cities in different states, again, different taxing rates. But just to give you a sense of the scope of revenue, in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, the rate here was higher, as 3%, not 2%. Their annual revenue is $3 million. And just to give you a sense, our budget is around $6 million. So, again, this is not a promise that Lambertville would raise this kind of money, but we found these online to show how it can impact, especially a small city. This can be a big portion of income. In Trinidad, Colorado, again, a different taxing rate, they raised about $3.5 million. Again, not a promise of what we would get in New Jersey, but there is a potential at 2% of some substantial revenue opportunities for the city. Okay, go to the next slide. This is online. These are hyperlinks on the online version that can get you to what we view as trusted sources of information about cannabis. And then the next slide. Okay, we're going to do public comment in just a second. I do want to run through our draft ordinance, or not our draft, our ordinance, to update these slides a little bit. But on the public comment portion, Stephanie, if you could move to the next slide there. I think we outlined kind of what the rules are. We don't have too many folks, so might be a little bit looser in this. We'd like to have you state your name and address for the record. This is being recorded, by the way, so please be cognizant of that. If you'd prefer not to be on camera, I think you probably can send us a question in the chat feature. I'm not quite sure about that. We can look into that.
I don't think the chat feature's been.
It's not okay. Okay, so you gotta come online, and you can. We're here to listen and to take questions. It's not necessarily going to be a back and forth. We want to hear what your comments are, what questions you are, to have to take that back to the decision-making bodies for the city, the planning board and the city council. If you're shy and don't feel like commenting on here, then you're welcome to send us an email at info@lambervillenj.org. Put cannabis in the heading, and we are tracking all the comments that we've received. So before we move to the public comment, I do want to just sort of talk a little bit about the prior public hearings, the input we've received to date, and where that led to. And again, we're still in the process of this. As I said, we had 2 public hearings. We've had a number of folks email us with sort of detailed comments, folks for and against. A couple themes came through in the initial things that we've, initial rounds of input. First is that there was really broad support for cannabis businesses in Lambertville. In the public question, it passed 82 to 18% here in Lambertville. That doesn't equate to housing cannabis businesses, but there was strong support for legalization, and the public input we've received has been supportive of housing businesses. Of the 6 types of businesses, people have really focused on retail. Those interested in operating businesses, members of the public and others have focused on retail. Some of the reasons were interesting. Some of the challenges, there's a lot of folks that have medical cards, but have to travel fairly great distances to get access to their medicine. So they were looking for more locally based providers to make it easier to access that. There was clearly a preference for small and mid-sized businesses. Sometimes nationally, they're very large entities that operate. I don't know that our footprint really is attractive to people who want to grow football fields worth of indoor cannabis. We don't really have facilities like that or space for that. But again, the focus really has been on small businesses. Folks did want to have some restrictions in terms of hours. They didn't want to just let this just permit them to exist without any kind of constraints. So there was suggestions around, especially around school districts and around hours of operations. And a number of folks said we should really treat this like liquor businesses, or at least look at the liquor businesses as a guidepost. And then lastly, there was, concerns have been raised, especially around traffic and parking challenges. So we've definitely been cognizant of that. If we turn to I'll just do one more minute and then we'll start up. And I'll invite folks in the work group to add any comments. Is that the ordinance does a couple of things. It would ban 5 of the 6 types of cannabis businesses and only allow retail. It would allow 4 retail stores. The goal here is to at least earmark at least 2 for what are qualified as micro businesses, and they have square footage limitations, sales limitations. They have employee size restrictions, and it has a preference for local employees who live in Lambertville. Certain controls around the signage of this. We don't want big blinking pot signs related to in these stores. 500 feet from the school, not permitted in single family dwellings or townhouses. It does have a 2% tax. We also are not permitting consumption areas. The law allows indoor and outdoor consumption areas under certain circumstances. So again, we've been pretty restrictive because I think we need more time to consider those other types of entities. With respect to retail, the one of the 6 that we would permit under this is again, those are done with restrictions as to the number, the time, and so forth, and they would have to be licensed by the state and meet that rigorous process as well. So with that, let me see if the other members of the work group want to say anything before we launch into public comment. So Stephanie or Reggie or Councilman Stegman, Corin, do you guys have anything you want to add?
I'm good.
Have no questions. Let's see if we can get some input.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Exactly.
We've talked a lot, or I've talked a lot. Let's move to the.
I know. I think you can raise your hand on this.
Yeah. So if you raise your hand, we do want to hear from you, and I have heard from you, some of you in writing, I think, but we'd like a dialogue here. So please.
Mr. Hambach has his hand raised.
Okay. Mr. Hambach.
George, please state your name and address for the record and proceed with your question or comment. You need to unmute yourself.
There we go.
Yeah.
George Hombach, 210 South Franklin Street. And any other information you need before I comment?
No,
Nope.
that's it. Proceed
Okay.
with your question or comment.
Okay. Well, the one question I had as listening to Ward early on, mentioning that it was the choice we had was either to ban it or accept all of the provisions. Was there an in between?
Yeah.
we-
So yeah, I may have spoken too quickly or not clearly on that. So with respect to each of the 6, you can ban. You can ban some, allow some. You can allow all or ban all. You can also not act, which is not a great result, and I don't think anybody's going to choose that. So I didn't talk too much about that. So a lot of municipalities have chosen to ban all right out of the gate. We did not choose to do that, and because we heard a lot of input from folks on retail, and because there was a concern that businesses could be shut out of the original round of applications if we, because when they put the application in, they have to demonstrate that the city has approved the location of where they that they have that the zoning is approved, and that that the town has permitted that type of business. So we were worried that the first round would be sort of shut out. So yeah, you can mix and match. We chose to, as I say, ban 5 to get more time to look at those, ban the consumption areas, but permit retail, because that's what we heard most about, and that we were able to research most in the time that the legislature gave us to act.
Okay.
Question,
Well,
George?
yeah, so then my comment would be, if, and I don't know the details on this one, veterans, for example, the PTSD is prevalent among many veterans, and it's cannabis is the drug of choice prescribed for PTSD. And if there were a provision, or can there be a provision with a retail outlet for a veterans discount, for example?
So I don't think there's anything in our rules that would stop a retailer from providing certain discounts. So we're not setting the price. The only thing that we're doing in terms of the cost is the 2% tax. I don't, I think that's going to be at the discretion of the retailer. I don't prohibit them from doing that.
Well, we would represent you more than likely for that retailer. So I guess that would have to be negotiated with whoever gets the rents, I presume.
Yes, I think that's right.
Okay. All right.
Anything else?
Word, is it okay if we stop sharing the screen?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, there we go. Okay, we do not have any other hands raised at this point. anybody else is interested in talking, you can raise your hand. At the bottom of your screen, you should see a little icon that says raise hand. Okay, we have Dean. Dean, please state your name and address for the record and proceed with your question or comment, and you will need to unmute yourself.
I think I just unmuted myself.
Yep,
I
you
didn't?
did.
Okay. Dean Stevens, 178 Brunswick Avenue in Lambertville. Being a longtime resident and longtime business owner, 39 plus years, we've seen a lot of ups and downs in town of all kinds. And I personally think, as a very small business owner, that this is a wonderful opportunity to boost the complete business community, small or large. Right now, we are hurting, and Lambertville itself would gladly love that 2% tax that is going to be coming in. And I think the numbers would be staggering in terms of what that 2% will eventually be in several short years. People from this area do have to travel, as Councilman Sanders mentioned earlier. Normally an hour or more, and another state licensed medical dispensary did open in Lawrence, and they had so that's about just under half an hour from Lambertville. So if we kind of don't move ahead with this, it's going to be moving in other locations around us. And I think taking away from the potential, not only the revenue that Lambertville City will get, but also just the general uptick in business that will come to town. I think your idea of 500 feet from the schools and churches, and I don't know about churches. I didn't see that listed in terms of the 500 feet, Councilman, but because then you're going to kind of knock out most of Lambertville if you do that. But overall, I mean, it's clear if you do listen to the public, not only on a statewide level, but within our own municipality, it's an overwhelming positive desire to see it move ahead. I did have a question, and that is in terms of the number of micro businesses, can it be 4 and not 2?
So yeah, this is something we're looking at because the drafting of the ordinance, I mean, the intention here was to have 4, to have at least 2 that were micro businesses, but they all 4 could be micro businesses.
Okay.
One of the challenges here that we wanted to be a little bit careful with is that, the statute divides the world into 2 types: micro businesses and non-micro businesses. Okay. The non-micro businesses might be somebody with 12 employees, who's I think the limit is 10. So, we didn't quite have a way of figuring out how to, because I think a mid-sized business makes sense. I think that the footprint of Lambertville is going to make us unattractive for the really large international kind of cannabis businesses. But to answer your question, yeah, the goal was to have at least to secure at least 2 of the 4 micro businesses. It could be all 4 was the intent here. But we also, if there's we couldn't just ban non-micro businesses, because I think we'd shut out kind of those mid-sized businesses. That was the sort of the challenge. And then you made a good point on the exclusionary zones. Those are very difficult in a town like Lambertville that only is, I forget what our Steve or somebody may know, the square footage or the, like a square mile or whatever. So exclusionary zones, if you're looking at various places, could gobble up the whole town. So the drug-free school zone, I think, was kind of focused on actual schools, and we have obviously LPS is the big one there. But if you start looking at other places, you could create the whole town as an exclusionary zone. That was the challenge,
Right.
challenges that we faced.
Mr. Stevens, may I ask you a question?
Sure.
How do you feel that bringing in the cannabis retail would affect your business?
Well, here's something very funny that everybody will get a chuckle out of. So we put our sign up many, many years ago, and never ever dreaming that this would even be on the table. And one of our keynote phrase is gourmet delights and edibles. And I can't tell you how many people in the last 2 years, since New Jersey's been getting closer and closer, come walking in and saying, okay, where are the edibles? And we sort of pointed our counter and showed the cookies and muffins and everything else. But to answer your question specifically, I think if the city does a real bang up job on very nicely and gently controlling all aspects of cannabis retail, that it will only have a positive impact on not only the small retailers such as Lisa and myself, but some of the sort of more mid-sized ones. We don't have any real large retailers in town, and I'm thrilled about that. Because, and again, I will, in total disclosure, I have a medical marijuana card that I got 1.5 years ago for some years and years worth of health issues. And it's a long drive to Cranberry, New Jersey. And I've watched very carefully how that dispensary, because I look at everything from an operational standpoint and how places are organized, how they're set up. And the ATC there, Alternative Treatment Center in Cranberry, is called Breakwater. And they do a wonderful job with not a lot of retail space. Now they're blessed, again, Cranberry is sort of, it's got all the parking you could possibly want in their more industrial areas, and that's where this particular dispensary is. But it's very secure. It's got all of the, you know, it touches all of the bullet points that Councilman Sanders outlined in terms of the surveillance, the security. They're not uniformed police officers, but they have their own in-house security, and they're not threatening. They don't put people off. So I think, again, if we keep it small in terms of, you know, just that word micro is very attractive in my way of thinking for the direction that this group and then ultimately the city would want to move in. And the smaller you keep it, also, yes, there will be a lot of people coming to town. So that's where we get the spin-off effect and helping other businesses. But I can tell you that at the Cranberry dispensary, there's a long line of cars. And I think that the 2% that Lambertville is looking at conservatively, and I also know Great Barrington very well, and I've been there and see how they are operating, and they are on a 3%, I believe, in Great Barrington. And it's a staggering amount of money that comes in. And it's very well controlled. And there's no reason why this has to be out of hand. And I'd be glad if anybody has any other questions. I don't know who else is on here. I don't want to dominate, but, you know, again, as a retailer for a long duration, feel free to ask whatever questions you want.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Yeah, Stephanie's question was the question that's what we really want to hear from, especially from the business community.
Yeah.
What does this mean for your business? Anybody else have questions for Dean? We appreciate you taking the time to talk to us tonight and give us such thoughtful comments, and appreciate all you've done for the town too.
Okay, you're welcome.
Okay, do we have other hands up?
No other hands at this. Well, George Hombach, I don't know if he put his hand back up.
We'll give George given the time here, we'll give him a return visit authority here. Do you have anything else to say, George? Or you just your hands actually up?
Yeah.
And their hands are both up because they.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep, sure
Yeah.
can.
Okay. I just have a quick question. The city has to react before the 21st of August. So I presume you're leaning toward retail, and first we'll serve on the date on that, or what's the
You're breaking up, George. I think I got the question. If I missed it, then just help me out here. But I think you were asking about where we were in the process. So at our July 6th meeting, we did propose or introduced an ordinance with the features that we've talked about. So banning all 5 except for retail and limiting it to 4. 2 of which we want to designate for micro businesses. That was introduced. There will be a public hearing coming up, and Cindy, that is the next Thursday. Is that correct?
July 22nd, yes.
So July 22nd. And then we need to adopt before the state's deadline of August 21st. The planning board had to look at this to make sure that it was consistent with our master plan, and they did that on July 7th and voted unanimously to find that it was in conformance with the master plan. Those were the 2 sort of hurdles that we had. Did I answer your question? Because you got kind of chopped up there, but I think that's what you were asking.
Yes, it did. And the other part of beyond that retail, there was something about consumption areas. Do we have to decide on that?
We are deciding right now to ban both indoor and outdoor consumption. We're trying to do a Goldilocks thing here. We're trying to make sure the porridge is not too hot and not too cold, and we only have certain information before us. There was definitely supporters for allowing consumption areas. There are concerns about odor control, having, an outdoor consumption area next door, an outdoor restaurant, for example, is probably a bad mix. So we just feel like we need more time to examine that. But the law does contemplate municipalities, permitting them to allow indoor and outdoor consumption areas. There's certain rules that the outdoor consumption areas have to be unseen from the road. I think you have to go through the front door. You can't, there's not like a side entrance. Other folks may have remember more than I do on that, but there is, certain odor control requirements. But one of the things we've seen nationally has been, there have been complaints about facilities, whether they're manufacturing or whatever, about odor challenges. And I can tell you from the sewage authority challenges we've had, it's odors are not insignificant. I mean, it just it can really. We want to make sure we get this right.
So I see that Mr. Stevens has his hand up again.
Sure. Yep. Yeah, Dean, I think you're good to go.
Dean, you just have to unmute yourself, Dean.
Okay, just following off on George Hombach's question about discounts. All of the, I don't know about all, but most of the state licensed facilities, it's up to them to determine what they want to discount. Most of them do. It's crazy if they don't. So there is a military discount, there's a senior discount, and there's actually a young child discount. Under 16 years old, at least in one. Because there are an awful lot of young children who have found that medical marijuana for issues like epilepsy and some other neurological issues is very, very helpful. And it's crazy because when I go, I will see very old people. I'm turning 70 and I'm talking about my dad's age, 97. There are a lot of seniors there, seniors as I call them, as well as much younger people. And one of the things that they had done during COVID, which is another possibility for Lambertville to do, would be they took 1 day a week for seniors. And that happened to be Mondays. And it was incredible how busy they would be on a Monday. So in terms of parking and the mobility issue for some seniors, it might not be a bad idea to at least give that some consideration in when the legislation and the more local legislation is drafted, in terms, because it's not like you can find a handicap spot. You know, there's going to be a lot of cars in town, a lot of people. So it might be something where, you know, Lambertville determines that we're going to take a day just for seniors. It certainly makes it a lot easier for them, and they're way more willing to come out and drive and spend their money when they know that they don't have to fight long crowds of much younger people.
No, Dean, I just want to make sure that we're all talking about the same type of license in town. This is not about medical marijuana dispensaries.
I know, yeah.
So it's about retail establishments, and the state has stopped issuing temporarily more than a small number of medical marijuana licenses. So I'm not sure if someone who's got a prescription can go into a retail place and ask it to be filled. It doesn't stop you from buying, obviously.
Right, that's my point. Forget the prescription. I'm talking about just being able for retailers need to be smart when they approach this, if this all goes through. And you guys want really very trusted, smart people opening. And I don't know how you screen for that, or you can control it or not. But you know,
there will be a pretty strong application process that we will not have that much to do with, because the state issues the license. And I see that Jeff is on here, and and has a liquor store in town, and a lot of people are equating the rules and regulations to be built off of those current regulations for alcohol. But we're all waiting to see how this works out, because we'll know more if the state meets their deadline of rules and regs. So we're kind of like in a fluid position here.
Right.
It doesn't stop, obviously, someone from trying to apply for, in addition to a medical marijuana dispensary, but that's kind of not on our horizon right now. And it would be, and I understand that there's a limited number of dispensaries, and like yourself, I hear from folks that would rather not drive so long distances to get their prescriptions filled. But at least we'll know that if this part goes through, you'll be able to purchase in town.
Right. And just lastly, I would also be a proponent for non-consumption outdoors. I think it really, I mean, you're opening up a whole nother can of worms by going down that road. Now, whether or not at some point in the future, Lambertville might be permitted to change, but if you guys start with no outdoor consumption, I think that's very positive.
Well, and if we could be clear on that as well, we're talking about outdoor consumption next to an existing retail store. It's not like people are going to be walking down the street, well, any more than they do now.
Yeah.
And then that becomes a municipal enforcement of the current laws about smoking, period.
Right.
So, yeah, we kind of got that feedback from other groups who we've spoken to, Dean, about having somewhere a minimum amount were in favor of consumption areas, because they were concerned about folks buying it and then going across the bridge, and now they're carrying an illegal substance in Pennsylvania. But there'll be house parties, I'm sure.
Thank you.
But thanks, Dean, for your input.
Any other questions or comments?
I don't see any other hands raised.
Okay.
You want to share the date of the public hearing on the ordinance, Cindy? Which council meeting?
It is Thursday, July 22nd. The meeting begins at 7 o'clock. at this point. I don't think there's going to be a closed session before. So, but we've advertised that it will begin at there's a place on the agenda for it. Come in, they'll do their minutes and their resolutions, and then they'll go to ordinances. So I would log on as close to 7 o'clock as possible if you're interested in participating. I don't mean log in.
I don't think we're
It's
doing
an
it by
in-person meeting, so it'll be at the Justice Center. We will be recording it and we will post it after the fact.
Okay. Any additional questions?
And if anybody wants the ordinance, it has been posted to our website at www.lambertville.nj.org. You see Amy Koss has her hands raised. Amy, please state your name and address for the record and proceed with your question or comment.
Hi, Dre Hook Road, but I have a business at 26 Bridge Street. When you say that indoor or outdoor consumption will be illegal, do you mean in a public space rather than in a private space?
Yeah, we're not talking about a private space. We're talking about a facility that would be set up like a bar.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. I think we confused folks before on that, the way we talked about that. Thanks for that clarification. Yeah. No, this wouldn't stop somebody from, buying legal cannabis at a retailer and then taking it to their home or a friend's home, whatever. Yeah, it's not like that. What we're talking about is a commercial enterprise to do indoor or outdoor consumption. That's what
like a cigar smoke shop, so to speak.
Okay, and then like public consumption of alcohol, it would be illegal for people to walk around the street using marijuana.
I believe that's right. Yeah. It's not addressed in our zoning ordinances. I think that's under the state. But I don't.
I think the ABC, the alcohol regulators in Trenton control outdoor consumption as well.
Yes, they do.
That's why you've got to get a permit if you do an event outside. So I don't know. Yeah. I think we have to. A lot of this is going to be released hopefully when the rules and regs are set.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Amy.
Yeah. Hey, Amy, if we could ask the same question that we asked, I mean, do you see an impact on your business, and how do you view this? If the state were to license an entity or entities in the city, what kind of impact do you think, or are you not sure?
Well, I'm really not sure. I think it depends. The kind of traffic that Lambertville sees for people coming to purchase marijuana at a legal marijuana shop would depend on how many of our neighboring towns allow retail shops. I think that if we are a little island amongst, in Hunterdon County where other towns have not allowed this, I think we're going to be very busy. And, if they decide to make a day of, lunch and a trip to the cannabis store, I think it'll only be good for my business because they'll wander around and they'll buy other things. And, we all contribute to that in our own way. I know that people come specifically to my store to buy beads. They go out to lunch. They go to Dean's. They get a cup of coffee before they go home. They stop in a mono. They shop around. So in that way, the diversification of the retail will be good. If I start to see people getting Airbnbs and having parties and then wandering in and they're high and they're annoying, that's going to be a detriment for sure.
Yeah.
So I've been thinking about that part of it as well.
Good point.
And I won't like that part, but I think so many people use marijuana already. It's high past time for it to be legal because it's silly the amount of people we have in prison. So I'll get used to it. I'll figure it out. And once people have, I'll just do the same thing I do with drunk people. The first drunk person I see on Saturday night, that's the end of my Saturday night. I close the door. So the first high person that annoys me, I'll shut the door.
You have to let them out at some point.
Yeah, you'll find them all in the basement. But I do think that's an aspect of it that we're just going to have to figure out.
And that's really part of the reason why we're approaching this in very small steps to begin with, because we've heard from folks as well that want us to approve every license now and just like really burst onto the scene. And there's a lot of unknowns in this, and that's why we're starting at a very small. We're kind of testing to see how it eventually will go. And as far as timing goes, since this is already July and the rules are supposed to come out next month, and then the rules have to be implemented, that some folks are in the know are saying that licenses, and there's an application process, that we won't see licenses being issued until 2022. So it's not going to happen overnight.
And to your point, Amy, about we'll have to see where they're granted, but in terms of permitting, I don't know, West Amwell had on their agenda to allow cannabis retail. I don't know if they ever acted on that. I think they pulled it down from the agenda. I don't know, Cindy, if you know.
Well, Maria Andrews is both Delaware and West Amwell's clerk. And one of them did introduce, but I can't remember which.
Yeah. And
Or if I'm not mistaken, Flemington did.
Flemington did, that's what I was
They
gonna
did
say too, yeah. And Trenton definitely did. So, we will have regional competition.
And Boyd, can you just touch on the delivery aspect of this before we end this? Because I think it's an important part to just talk about.
Yeah, and some folks are saying, they didn't want cannabis, business, being transacted in the city at all. And just to be clear, if there was a delivery facility in, I don't know, Flemington or wherever, the state law prohibits municipalities from prohibiting delivery service in your municipality. So, for the folks, I think it's an important point for folks to understand who want to, just ban all, sales. Is sales are going to happen in our town through the delivery mechanism. There's another aspect of this, which is we could house those delivery facilities, but they, generally require a sort of fleet of cars. And again, I'm not quite sure that we'd be a great venue for that, based on our location and size and footprint and so forth.
Yeah.
But we, just to be clear that, we will have, delivery services coming into the town, and that's that the state, kind of mandates that.
Or Delaware Township adopted an ordinance prohibiting the operation of any class of cannabis within its geographical boundaries.
Gotcha.
And West Amwell is still working on it.
They pulled theirs, and I
yeah.
don't have a revised version.
Thanks for checking, Cindy. It's good to know.
Sure.
And Amy, thank you for your thoughtful comments. It's exactly what we're looking for tonight, is to learn from folks. Okay, do we have any other hands up?
No other hands.
All right. We're just about at our hour, so why don't we close up here? I just want to thank the volunteers here on the cannabis work group. So Corin, Reggie, Stephanie, and Steve. Thank you for your input and volunteerism for the city. And Cindy, thank you for taking some time on a day off, I know, to help us facilitate. And thank you to the members of the business community who took your time. I'm sure you guys are very busy to learn more about the state law and what the issues are before the city. And for those of you who shared your input, that was very important for us to hear.
And Ward, I'd like to also thank the chamber for helping get our message out to its members. And Jane Wesby is on this as well. And I thank Jane as the president of the chamber and the staff of the chamber for really helping us get the message out. It's really important. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jane and Cindy. And with that, I think we are at 6:29, so we'll give you back a minute of your time for this evening. Thank you so much, and we'll hope to see you all soon. Take care.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.